Draw you something here that you might have seen me draw sometime before, maybe not. But the idea here is when we talk usually about leadership, everyone always thinks that we're talking about leading people who God has entrusted. So we think of leading down. We also think about leading. Most of us have a boss. Most of us have boards or elders or board of trustees, someone above us. And there's actually some ways that we need to learn how to lead up. We're going to talk about that in the next session. There are ways to lead laterally. Again, we'll get to that eventually. But in this session, I want to talk to you about the toughest person you will ever lead. And some of you think it's someone down here, or someone here, here, or here. And in actuality, the toughest person you're ever going to lead your whole life long is you. This is you, right at the center of this little intersection here. This is called self-leadership. And I probably went 20 years into my leadership tenure without having my head wrapped around what self-leadership really was. I say that to my own embarrassment. But in actuality, before you can lead anybody else, you have to have self-awareness that you are a leader. You have to know that you have an effect on people. You have to know that whether or not you get better as a leader matters. And you have to, again, that self-judgment that if you're not progressing as a leader, you watch the people around you glaze over and lose their sense of enthusiasm following you. And that has to send some data points to you. My people don't enjoy following me that much anymore. What's up with this? That's often a reflection of poor self-leadership. So I want to talk to you about this for a little while. And I think you'll find it fascinating. So just to start the thing out, when you're leading yourself, I find that some people are way too hard on themselves in their self-leadership. They're self-critical. If they make one bad leadership decision, they beat themselves up and are merciless with themselves. They fall into a kind of despondency. And again, that self-critical pressuring up of themselves actually damages their ability to lead others. They don't feel they're worthy to lead. They lose their confidence. They lose their step. And so some of us are too hard on ourselves. Talk about that more in a minute. Some of us are exactly the opposite. We are too easy on ourselves. We drop a leadership ball, we make a leadership fumble, and we go, oops, and we pretend like there's no consequence. Whereas in actuality, every time a leader drops a ball, every time a leader makes a bad call or mishandles a situation, your stock goes down. People's trust in you is affected. So if in your self-leadership, you're a little too casual about it and you say, hey, we all get, a number of fumbles and it doesn't matter if we mishandle this or that. If you're too easy on yourself, in your self-leadership, that's going to affect you long-term in a very deleterious way. So the verse that I want to sort of base the rest of this lecture on is Romans 12:8, which says, if you've been entrusted with leadership or with the leadership gift, it says you need to lead, remember the phrase, with all diligence. Now, the suggestion there is that you can lead with a quarter diligence, you can lead with a half, you can lead with 3/4, or you can lead with all diligence, which I take in part to mean taking responsibility for your own leadership development. This was a breakthrough concept to me. Earlier in my leadership career, if you will, I felt it was someone else's job to develop me. And I would get in a tough leadership situation, couldn't find a way out, and I would say, well, no one's expecting me to actually step up and take responsibility. Someone else should have helped me, should have developed me. I mean, someone has let me down. I'm a victim in this. And somehow, I eventually broke through that victim mentality, and I said to myself, for the rest of my life, if nobody develops me, I'm still going to develop myself. That's a watershed mark in the life of a leader. And I meet leaders all the time who are behaving and misleading and blowing things up. And I'll say, ooh, it doesn't seem like it's going too well with your leadership. And they'll say, no one's developing me. No one's mentoring me. What am I supposed to do? And I'm like, you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to step up and leave victim land and take responsibility for your own leadership development. The day you do that is the day your leadership takes off on a new trajectory, and you can keep it going on that new trajectory for the rest of your life. But that is a very important day. Sometimes when I'm teaching leadership classes, I'll end a session like this, say, could today be the day when you sign a covenant with yourself and God that you are going to take full responsibility for your own leadership development from this day forward? Anything anybody adds to your equation is gravy. But if nobody ever adds anything to you the rest of your life, you are responsible, and you can get better as a leader anyway. Clear on this? Okay. Now, so then the next question is, well, then how, if I wanted to take responsibility, how do I get better as a leader if I'm taking responsibility for it myself? Okay. So here are my suggestions. First, sounds very simple. It's not as simple as it sounds. Read everything you can read on the subject matter of leadership. Read everything you can read, not just in a narrow vein. Like I tell pastors, don't just read about other pastors. I tell business people, don't just read about other business leaders. Read across industries, across disciplines. Most leaders read recreationally about leadership. They'll say, you know, I haven't read a good leadership book in, 3 or 4 months, and I might get around to finding one someday. And then they'll ask another leader 2 years later, have you read anything good on leadership? Oh, I haven't. And so if you're serious about self-development as a leader, you decide in advance that you're going to read one leadership book a month or one every other month, whatever your rhythm allows for, but you read as a discipline. You say, I'm going to read a book every other month, let's say, or you say, I'm going to read 15 pages on leadership a day or a week or whatever it is. Sometimes people say, you quote so many different authors. It seems like you're reading all the time about leadership. Where do you find the time? And I say, I don't have the time. I make the time. And I'm as susceptible as anybody else after a 15 or 16-hour day. And you're finally free at night to sit on the couch and turn on CNN or whatever you watch. And I have to reach for that remote and say, I have not read my 15 minutes on leadership today. Click. Here we go. And it is a discipline. And if you read as a discipline, what will happen is that some percentage of the time you'll close the book after the 15 minutes and you'll say it was a waste. Don't ever believe that lie. It's never a waste. And I could tell you a half a dozen times where I've read an entire leadership book that I thought, oh, none of that applied to me. 6 months later, I'm in a situation and I remember back and I go, I have access to all that material, and now I am in the situation that book was preparing me for. So keep reading, keep asking other people what you should be reading. Read as a discipline. Now, a little side note on this. I have heard leaders complain all my leadership life where they say, no one has ever mentored me, okay? They say, you had Dr. B, you've had some wonderful mentors. I never had a mentor, you see, and then they start playing the violin and want me to, get weepy with them. And I say, listen, you don't have to know someone to be mentored by them. You really don't have to ever meet the person who can be the most important mentor in your life. All you have to do is read whatever they've written, watch whatever lectures or training that they've done. You take responsibility for your own leadership development. If you can't get someone to mentor you, you can be mentored from afar. Second is make sure you go where leadership is taught. Go where leadership is taught. And you say, well, that's expensive. I don't have the time. True on both accounts. Some leadership development is pricey, and it all requires time. I go back to the question, do you want to get better as a leader? Because if you do, you will arrange your life and you will arrange your finances in a way where you can go where leadership is taught. Third is find people who are ahead of you in leadership and ask them smart questions. Now, this is another thing that requires self-motivation. You're not going to ever have a knock on your door where an advanced leader shows up at your door and says, "Would you like some knowledge?" It is never going to happen. If you're dreaming of that day, stop dreaming. You are going to have to make some phone calls and knock on some doors and be humble about it. Here's what I have suggested. You find someone in your community, preferably, who leads something larger than you lead, and not necessarily in the field that you are leading. That isn't that important. I'll actually give you the line that I use. I'll say, I respect what you have built, the organization, the company, the church, whatever it is. I respect what you have built so much that if you would be willing, I'll buy you lunch. It'll only take 30 minutes. I will only ask you 3 questions. I won't waste your time. At the end of the 30 minutes, I'll leave. I'm not asking to become your friend or your pen pal, and you certainly don't have to reparent me, okay? I'm not asking for anything like that. I respect your leadership, and I'm not as far ahead as you are, and if you could bless me with 30 minutes and some of your knowledge, it would mean a lot. And sometimes I get a flat no. I don't have time for, a pastor down the street. Sorry. And I say, okay, I respect you. I know you're a busy person. Thanks for at least responding. So I get quite a few no's. I get some surprising yeses. And when I go, I keep my word. I buy the lunch. I say only 3 questions. And after 30 minutes, I'm going to leave, see? And as fate would have it again, I've developed some incredible relationships with people beyond where I am because I kept my word. I asked intelligent questions, and when I got the answer, so right down the street from us here at Willow Creek is the world headquarters of Motorola Corporation, and years ago, Bob Galvin was the CEO of that. I sent him a note, just like I described, and courteously, he said, 3 months from now, I have 30 minutes, you buy, at our cafeteria at Motorola. And I said, I'll be there. I showed up on time, met him in the cafeteria, bought the lunch, asked him 3 questions. I always change the questions, by the way, so if you're asking, what are the 3 questions? It depends on who I'm meeting with. But one of the questions I asked Bob that day was, you run a multinational corporation and you have high profitability numbers, and so when you want to motivate your top people, you can pay them very large salaries and 6-figure bonuses. I run a church that's donor-based, and I have to pay my staff on the offerings of school teachers and widows, and so our salaries have to be quite realistic, and I can't give very, very large bonuses. And so I said, would you have been able to build Motorola with the compensation limitations that I've had to work with down the street at Willow Creek Church? And he said, that would have been a challenge for me, frankly, because he said, in my industry, money talks, or sometimes without money, people walk. And so I had that momentary glee, where I thought, oh, see, so that's why it's so hard, And then this wise, very sophisticated gentleman, Bob, he said, but Reverend Hybels, you need to find a different currency to motivate your top performer. If you can't use money like the rest of us do, there's other currencies. I have never forgotten that answer. But that all started with simply saying, he's smarter, he's further ahead in leadership than I am. I'll take the risk of contacting him. And if he says no, I haven't lost anything really. And if he says yes, something great could be gained. So my question to you is, who are the 2 or 3 leaders who are ahead of you, who you could contact, who you could buy lunch? 3 questions that you vary according to the expertise of the individual. And then you leave on time and you say thank you very much and trust God with whatever happens. So Read whatever you can read on leadership. Go where leadership is taught. Get around people who are ahead of you and ask them smart questions. And then the fourth one is lead with greater intensity tomorrow than you did today. So much of what you learn about leadership happens on the job. If you come to work every day and say, I'd like to lead 5% better, and I would like to be a little more creative, and you push yourself as a leader, you'll be surprised how much you'll develop by just pushing yourself in your current leadership role. So we clear on those 4 ways of leadership development. Okay, one more subject matter on self-leadership that is critical, and I'm frankly disappointed that more of my leadership peers don't take this seriously. I don't understand it. But I think every serious-minded leader needs a leadership journal as a discipline. In other words, many of us journal in our relationship with God. We chronicle the activities of God in our lives. We write out our prayers. Some of us, we do reflections spiritually. If you've been entrusted with what God treasures most in this world, and you know what that is, it's people. There is nothing that is more precious to God than people. And he has taken some of what he treasures the most, and he's said, here's 20 people. You're going to lead them. You think about that. It's what he treasures most, and he's entrusted them to you, okay? Now, if you don't reflect periodically on how you're stewarding those 20 people, if you don't ask yourself questions like, am I getting better as a leader? That's worth journaling on every couple weeks. Am I getting better as a leader? Spend 10 minutes on that. How am I getting better as a leader? Am I inspiring the people God has entrusted to me? We have a lot of leaders who give instructions, they give no inspiration. I have a little rule I've tried to follow in my own leadership. I would like at the end of every meeting in my office, I want people to levitate out of my office. I might have tough meetings with them, but when the meeting is coming to an end, I want to start to wrap it up, and I want to say thank you very much for being on our team. And your best days are in front of you. And you've got talent that you haven't tapped into yet. You have a future that's incredible. And so as we end this meeting, I'm going to say a prayer for you. And I want you to lean into your potential because there's a lot of it there. No matter how tough the meeting is, I want to inspire people as they leave my office so that they have a little bounce in their step and they think, I want to come back to Bill's office someday, you know, because every time I'm in there, I leave with a little more than I came in there with. Another couple of questions that I journal about on a consistent basis is, are my spiritual disciplines effective so that people can see that I'm growing in God? Again, I lead in the faith field. Some who are participating in this series might not be in that field, but I'm a Christian and a serious-minded one, and I have to ask myself, are the spiritual practices that I used 6 months ago causing the same connectedness with God today as they did 6 months ago, and what if they're not working as well? And the little exercise I do there is I say, how do I need to experiment with my spiritual practices so that staying close to God happens and that people can tell that I walk with God and don't just, you know, talk a good game? Another question I ask, are my replenishment disciplines working? Am I slowly getting worn down so that people don't see the bounce in my step, so that they're like, oh, Bill's burning out, Bill's, you know, on the edge, you know? That's not a comfortable place to put your followers. So I have to ask myself, are my replenishment practices and disciplines working such that when people around me, they don't sense a frenzied spirit and they go, I think he's okay. I think he's going to keep it together for another week or two. So it's good to reflect on that. So you need to ask yourself the questions that pertain to your self-development. We're talking about self-leadership. So what are the 10 questions, perhaps? that you need to ask yourself on a consistent basis to check in and then reflect. Are those good? Are they still operative and healthy in my life? And again, who God treasures the most? People. And if he's given you some, you want to develop as a leader and be as diligent as you can. There's a verse in Jude 20, and the verse simply says, build yourself up in the faith. Build yourself up. Don't be passive about your faith. Take responsibility and build yourself up. Read the scriptures, pray, do the practices that build you up. And I like to make the same transfer over into the leadership realm. As a leader, build yourself up. Don't wait for anybody to do it for you. If they do, that's great. But if not, you take full responsibility, do the development as we've discussed in this session. And I remind you one more time, the toughest person you will ever lead is you. But you can lead yourself and grow yourself into a fantastic leader someday.